Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Ghana's fugitive ex-finance minister is held by ICE in the US. Ken Ofori-Atta's been a wanted man ever since last February. Accused of corruption, he's now reportedly detained by US immigration in Virginia over his residency status. Also, just over a week from Uganda's presidential vote. And amidst long-held complaints that political space has come under pressure, we hear from our correspondent who's spoken to colleagues of a human rights activist recently arrested. And the calm before the storm as AFCON wraps up for the quarterfinals. We take the temperature of the story so far and thumb ahead to what's still in store for the chapters to come. We hear from Good Sport and Ghanaian sports journalist Godfred Boafa, who joins me from Accra. But first, accused of graft and misuse of public money, Ghana's former finance minister has been on the run from authorities at home since last year. But it's US immigration who has him detained. Ken Ofori-Atta has been in the States since January 2025, reportedly for prostate cancer treatment. But he's now being held at a detention center in Virginia as he tries to sort out his visa status. Justice Baidu tells us more.
The Immigration and Customs Enforcement of the United States of America detained Mr. Ken Ofori-Atta, Ghana's former finance minister, on Wednesday, January 7, 2026. His lawyers in Ghana say they are currently working to have him released, and his detention is in connection with his continued stay in the United States beyond his allowed days there. The news of Mr. Ofori-Atta's detention comes as some sort of good news to the Ghanaian government that has been working for months since February of 2025 to have him extradited to Ghana to face justice. The government says Mr. Ofori-Atta has played key roles in several scandals that has led to the country losing around $500 million of state money. Mr. Ofori-Atta's case is one of several of the past ministers in the administration of the New Patriotic Party that lost power in 2024 that are currently running in several courts in Ghana. At the beginning of the government's term in January of 2025, it said that it is estimating to retrieve over $20 billion in looted funds that are with several members of the past government. Mr. Ofori-Atta is believed to be one of the most powerful members of the erstwhile New Patriotic Party administration, in part because of his relationship with the former president Nana Akufo-Addo, and it is believed that his detention and a possible trial would open doors to several other cases that the government is following.
Justice Baidu there for us. Now, Washington is pausing aid to Somalia and accused port authorities there of having destroyed a World Food Programme warehouse and of having raided supplies donated for breastfeeding mothers and their young children. Mogadishu says that there were renovations around the building and that the management of the food aid had not been affected. They insist and have offered paperwork up to show that the stock was first handed over to WFP officials for storage somewhere else after they'd been given notice of the planned works at the original warehouse site. The US State Department, though, says that restarting aid to Somalia depends on whether it takes accountability. Meanwhile, US aid in parts of South Sudan have also recently been suspended over allegations of aid theft there. And dozens of people turned out to a protest outside of the US Embassy in Pretoria, South Africa on Thursday in condemnation of Washington's capture of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. Now, he was captured in a military raid on Caracas on Saturday and accused of drug trafficking. Public sentiment in South Africa echoes the government's call for the US to release Maduro and his wife.
Today we are here to call first for the release of President Maduro, and then secondly to allow all institutions that exist and the mechanisms that exist to just drill into the US heads, although they are aware of this, that all countries are sovereign and they need to be allowed to do what they want to do.
Our democracy was achieved as a consequence of international solidarity. So expression of international solidarity is a component of our own struggle as well.
In just over a week, Ugandans vote on who is to be their next president. Political space there has been tightly squeezed, though, under President Yoweri Museveni, who's hoping to cruise towards a 7th term. Those seen as not serving his interests say that they often fear reprisals, and our correspondent Juliet Monti has been there and spoken to some of those working with a recently arrested human rights campaigner.
In Uganda, the authorities are accused of stepping up repression against any critical voices as the presidential vote draws closer. Critics' concerns have only deepened since human rights activist and highly influential lawyer Sarah Birite was arrested on the 30th of December. I spoke to her colleagues at the headquarters of her NGO, the Center for Constitutional Governance. They are still shocked by what happened and are convinced that her detention was arbitrary and politically motivated.
She has been very consistent in criticizing the excesses of the government and the state, especially the human rights violations that are well documented. And these are not things that she imagines these are things that everybody sees. But she has been that voice, that bold and fearless face and voice that could stand up and address these issues without fear. So Dr. Sarah's arrest is just a message to everybody else that if you dare speak up or speak out against the state, then the same thing that happened to her will happen to you.
Officially, Sarah Birite is accused of illegally obtaining data from the Electoral Commission. But the CCG says the charges are completely fabricated. The NGO sees her arrest as part of a broader pattern of repression ahead of the elections. Amnesty International says nearly 400 people have been held over the last few months because of their perceived support for the opposition.
It just shows you that it is not an environment that wants to allow political pluralism, okay? And they'll find whatever way to push back against that. And that is not healthy for a country that is actually going into a democratic process just days from now.
President Yoweri Museveni has been in power since 1986 and will be running for a 7th term on January 15th. His main rival, Bobi Wine, the leader of the National Unity Platform, still says it was he who won the 2021 vote.
Juliet Monti there for us in Kampala. Well, round 16 is rounded up, and Thursday offered a brief lull before the Africa Cup of Nations heads into the quarterfinals. Now, AFCON is a huge draw for football fans around the world, but on the continent, it really taps into the deep emotional well of pride and passion that brings so much of Africa together during the tournament. I'm joined now for a breakdown with Godfred Buafo, who's a Ghanaian sports journalist who has kindly agreed to join me for a look back and hopefully a look forward. First of all, Godfred, is it just me? Because I feel like this year the tournament is bigger than ever. That being the case, particularly since we're seeing West Africa doing a pretty good showing, it must sting a bit that the Black Stars aren't there. How are you doing?
I'm not doing too well. I'm not doing too well because this is Ghana's tournament. You know, everybody talks about Ghana as a country that they've gotten to know through the World Cup, particularly what happened with Ghana in 2010 when the whole of Africa, the whole world rallied behind the country. But the AFCON is Ghana's tournament. It's the tournament that has given Ghana its football pedigree. Of course, being 4-time winners, that pedigree is rightfully earned. And so for a tournament that has been as well organized and has been as beautiful as what we have seen in Morocco, Ghana being absent and all our West African rivals being present and doing well is one that really stinks.
Well, I'm sure I'm not alone in saying we thank you for your graciousness. Okay, so but looking at those who are those who have been in play, give us a breakdown of how you felt about AFCON so far, and what are some of the standout matches, moments, and men that have really stuck with you.
Well, I think it's been an incredible experience for the teams who have been in Morocco, particularly because of the facilities that have been available. I think that if you look generally at the organization, the logistics, the infrastructure, this has been as good an international tournament as you will find anywhere. And considering the fact that Morocco obviously have the World Cup in their sights for 2030, this is kind of like a testing mic situation for Morocco in terms of organizing this tournament. Of course, they are no newbies to organizing this tournament. They've come to the rescue of CAF quite a bit in the past 5 or so years, hosting a lot of CAF tournaments. And so it's not really been surprising that it's been well organized. Of course, there have been complaints about the fact that it lacks the regular vibe of an AFCON. You're not getting too much drumming and dancing. But I just think that it was a lot of Ghanaians who were talking because we were not there. I think generally, if you look at some of the situations that we have seen, some of the great moments, if you look at the gentleman from the DRC, the Lumumba doppelganger, and the kind of breakthroughs he's made. If you look at the incredible fans that we've had from countries like Mali, like from Ivory Coast, Nigeria, and the music and the color that they have brought. If you look at the home team, Morocco itself, every time they play, it's just a sea of red. It truly has been an amazing sight. And in terms of the games, I think they've been high quality. We've seen the African game improve and improve, particularly from the last AFCON, which was won by Cote d'Ivoire. The general level of football was incredible, and I think we've seen an even better version, an even better advertisement of what the African game is, particularly at this particular AFCON. Standout games, I think one game that everybody missed but was really good was the game between Burkina Faso and Equatorial Guinea. That was the game that Equatorial Guinea was leading pretty late until Burkina Faso, in the last 3 minutes of the game, flipped on its head. In my estimation, the game of the tournament so far has been the group stage draw between Cameroon and Ivory Coast. That was just breathless football. Two high-quality teams filled with world-class stars who gave us a game to remember. And that has led us into the Final Four that starts tomorrow, the Final 8 tomorrow. And it starts with a big one.
Yeah, because there's some pretty meaty pairings coming up. Yeah, there's some pretty exciting things that we've got lined up. What, for you, is the face-off that you're looking forward to the most?
I could say that I'm looking forward to all the games, but I think the Egypt versus Ivory Coast game is important because Ivory Coast are the defending champions, and Egypt have an incredible record in the AFCON, and they are looking to regain their glory days. So I think for me, that is one that we should look out for. Of course, Cameroon versus Morocco, because Morocco really, really want to win this AFCON. They've done really well. They are the defending champions. That is the domestic seniors championship. They've won that. They've won a couple of age tournaments. They are basically the form team of African football, except the AFCON. Recall they did well at the World Cup where they were in the Final Four. They really, really want to do well with this AFCON. So I think the Cameroon-Morocco game is one that comes with high stakes as well. Mali-Senegal will be a tough game because Mali are very hard to bring down. Senegal, perhaps the deepest squad of any of the teams left in the tournament. They could put out 2 starting 11s. That would be absolutely world-class. Mali haven't played too well. They've been very defensive. So I think Senegal will fancy their chance. And of course, Algeria versus Nigeria. Nigeria will also fancy their chances of making it to the Final Four. But if you ask me, Egypt, Ivory Coast, really, really big game.
Thank you so much. Godfred Boafo there, gracefully joining us from Ghana for a look ahead and a look back at the Africa Cup of Nations in Morocco so far as it heads into the quarterfinals starting on Thursday. That is, though, all we have time for Eye on Africa. Thanks very much for joining us, and do so again if you can. Till then, take care.